Well, now, just hours ago, Steve Jobs has resigned as chief executive of Apple, the company he built.
I remember like it was yesterday, mid-2011, when Steve Jobs handed over the reins of Apple to Tim Cook. Back then, everyone thought Steve just wanted to kick back a little, focus on his health, and still keep a tight grip on the creation of new products. I mean, makes sense, right? But the reality was different. Steve already knew his time was running out and was preparing for his replacement. The problem was, Cook didn't get the warmest welcome. And the main reason, well, he just wasn't Jobs.
How are you not Steve Jobs?
In many ways, a simple way to think about it to me is leaving things better than you found them.
We all remember Steve Jobs as that visionary guy, right? The one who could seemingly pull new products out of thin air and gather some of the most brilliant minds around him, laying down the foundation for Apple way back in 1976. Now fast forward to Tim Cook. He often gets flagged for being more of a businessman than an inventor.
Apple doesn't have a pack.
But guess what? That business savvy led Apple to some of its highest financial achievements in 2024. Yet, people keep saying that under his leadership, Apple lost its innovative spark. These two moments in time, they represent two polar opposites of what Apple is all about. They symbolize two generations of leadership that, on the surface, seem completely different, but they're not as different as you might think. So why am I making such a bold claim? Well, I decided to dig a little deeper and look at Apple's products through the lens of who's actually behind them. And you know what? This approach opened up a whole new side of the company's story.
I can make a contribution here. He was doing something totally different.
I refuse to have one because it shouldn't exist. Is that we love competition at Apple. We think it makes us all better.
All of those guys are wrong. And I'd always thought that following the herd was not a good thing. It was a terrible thing to do.
Tools that are meant to unite us. If you give me more rights than I have, then you have less.
Picture this. It's 2007. June 29th, to be exact. Seems like just another day, right? But nope, this day is about to change everything. This is the day the first iPhone hits the shelves. By the end of the year, Apple had sold around 6.1 million of these bad boys worldwide. But this wasn't just another phone. This was the gadget that completely redefined what mobile devices could be. A touchscreen, no physical buttons, and the internet right in your pocket. It was like a tech explosion. The iPhone wasn't just a device, it became the symbol of a whole new era. And let's be real, we all know and love it because it didn't just change Apple. It turned Steve Jobs into a legend, a true gem, almost too good to be real. But let's zoom out for a sec. 2007 wasn't just any year. The mobile phone market was already booming. Over 1.15 billion units were sold, up 16% from 2006. And who was king? Nokia. They sold 435 million phones, holding a whopping 37.8% of the market. The market seemed oversaturated, right? But then the iPhone comes in and breaks through that wall. Why? Because it wasn't just a phone, it was a revolution, an innovation that the market didn't even know was waiting for. Before this, since 1976, Apple was mostly about computers. The Macintosh, the Apple II, these were the machines that brought everyday people into the tech world. But in 2007, Jobs made a bold move. He announced that the company would no longer be called Apple Computers Inc. From now on, it's just Apple Inc. This was a clear signal. Apple wasn't just about computers anymore. Jobs was setting the stage for something bigger. He wasn't just thinking about the computer on your desk. He was thinking about the future. And he was ready to lead the way. You ever watch old videos and think, man, how did everything look so easy back then? A computer company managed to pack a powerful machine into a tiny box and make it available to everyone. And now the question pops up, what could even compare to that? Maybe an even smaller box? You know, I've always thought that what defines person is their work. Take this for example. In 1982, Tim Cook earned his bachelor's degree in industrial engineering. Meanwhile, Steve Jobs was doing something a bit different. He was at Reed College in Portland, Oregon, but without a clear sense of direction, he ended up dropping out after just 6 months. For the next year and a half, he dabbled in creative classes at the school. Now, back then, there was no such thing as online learning or easy access to information like we have today. Jobs had to create his own path, and he did it his way. But here's the thing, if you want to create something now, it's way easier to combine learning with work. Take Imprint for example. This app lets you do just that. Imprint is a unique learning app that changes the way we educate ourselves. It's not just another app, it's built from scratch. And it's got this cool, science-based approach that feels fresh and different. What I love is that it doesn't just throw information at you, it makes sure you actually learn and retain it. The visuals are clean, the lessons are short, and everything is interactive. So I'm not just passively scrolling through text. Plus, the way it combines text with visuals really helps to make complex ideas easier to grasp. There's something here for everyone. I'm personally into the course on essential philosophy with Professor John Cagg right now. It breaks down complex theories in a way that's really easy to digest. What really stood out for me is how efficient it is with my time. Each lesson is just a couple of minutes, perfect for squeezing into your day, but even with these short bursts, it's packed with solid content that actually makes me feel like I've learned something valuable. Whether you are into psychology, philosophy, or even the science of happiness, Imprint has also won some serious awards like being named Google's App of the Year and already has millions of users. You can try it out free for 7 days and there's a sweet 20% off an annual plan if you decide to stick with it. Give it a shot if you're looking to learn something new in a way that really sticks. Scan the QR code on the screen and start learning. And thanks Imprint for sponsoring this video. 2015. Tim Cook steps onto the stage, announces the Apple Watch, and the sales begin. And everyone's like, who even needs this? Back then, the smartwatch market was dominated by Samsung, Fitbit, and Garmin. Apple was killing it with smartphones and laptops, but now, suddenly, they're dropping a watch. But in 2015, Apple sold about 12 million Apple Watches. That gave them 2/3 of the smartwatch market in the very first year. If you think the success of the Apple Watch was just about slick marketing and brand status, hold up for a second. Creating something new is one thing, but making it a must-have, that's a whole different ballgame. These smartwatches don't just work seamlessly with other Apple devices, they're setting the stage for being absolutely essential. Just check out these features. Health monitoring, blood oxygen levels, ECG, and notifications for irregular heartbeats. You know, people used to say that smartwatches, especially the Apple Watch, were just a cute little gadget, not some groundbreaking innovation. They would complain about how expensive they were, how they had too many useless features, how complicated the setup was, and how they were basically just an accessory to your smartphone. But fast forward 3 years, an Apple Watch has the largest market share in the smartwatch industry, bigger than the entire Swiss watch industry combined. You know what else got roasted pretty hard? The first iPhone. No joke, people were tearing it apart. They said it was way too expensive, that the non-removable battery was a joke, and that the internet speed was garbage because it only supported Edge, while other phones were already moving to 3G. One of the loudest critics was none other than Steve Ballmer, the former CEO of Microsoft. He straight up said the iPhone would never take off and called it the most expensive phone in the market. Even Seth Borges from TechCrunch predicted it would flop, and Ed Colligan from Palm confidently stated the computer guys couldn't make a decent phone. Now I get it, comparing these might seem like a stretch, but think about it. Both types, Apple dropped into an already established market with Jobs and the iPhone, and later with Cook and the Apple Watch. And they absolutely crushed it. They didn't just enter the market, they redefined it, pushing the boundaries of what tech could be. That's what makes Apple, well, Apple. Some people might say Tim Cook just followed the path Steve Jobs laid out for him, and honestly, there is some truth to that. But let's not forget, creating something new and building on what's already there are two completely different challenges. Tim Cook took over as Apple's CEO on August 24th, 2011. At that time, Apple was already a giant, valued at over $350 billion, with hits like the iPhone 4, iPad, MacBook Air, and MacBook Pro. Just imagine one wrong move, one careless word, and it all could come crashing down. Stock losses, disappointed fans, everyone was worried about that. So naturally, the critics didn't wait long to pounce. Cook faced a storm of criticism from analysts and journalists who doubted he could fill Jobs' shoes. For example, Brian White from Ticonderoga Securities said Cook wasn't an innovator and that his conservative management style might slow down Apple's innovation. But let's be real. Criticizing Apple's leadership is nothing new. This company has faced harsh critiques before. Remember back in 1997 when Apple was on the brink of collapse? Michael Dell, founder of Dell Technologies, famously said that if he were in Steve Jobs' place, he'd just shut the company down and give the money back to the shareholders. And here is where the magic happens. When you start looking at Apple's history through the lens of its releases, you discover something incredible that really showcases Jobs' genius. Let me break down something pretty wild I've noticed. Let's roll back to 1993. Apple launched the Newton, one of the first PDAs, or personal digital assistants. The concept was ahead of its time, a device that could recognize handwriting and even transfer data through an infrared port. But here's where things went south. First off, the handwriting recognition was far from perfect. And second, the price tag, $699, for a device people didn't really need back then. In 1993, that was some serious cash, so unsurprisingly, Newton didn't take off. Now fast forward to 1994, Apple comes out with a QuickTake, one of the first digital cameras for regular consumers. There were three models: QuickTake 100, QuickTake 150, and 200. The 200 was especially cool with its color LCD for previews, adjustable focus and aperture settings, and get this, removable memory cards with a whopping 2 or 4 megabytes of storage. That was enough for up to 40 standard quality photos. For the time, that was pretty cutting edge. Then in 1996, Apple decided to dip its toes into the gaming market with the Pippin. This wasn't just a gaming console. It could connect to the internet, run educational software, multimedia apps, and even let third-party developers create their own games and apps, but it was priced at $599. Didn't have many games, and the software support was weak. It just couldn't compete with the $200 Nintendo 64 or the $300 PlayStation. The result? Only about 42,000 units were sold. So I'm pretty sure you guys are already in the loop. These gadgets hit the market after Steve Jobs had already left Apple. Just a quick reminder, Jobs left the company back in 1985. Now, he was a genius, no doubt about that, but that also made him a bit of a handful. You know how it is. Talent and a strong personality often go hand in hand. And when a company starts growing, different opinions start to clash, and internal conflicts are pretty much inevitable. A few misunderstandings among the leadership, a couple of bad decisions, and eventually they asked Jobs to step aside. For a while, he just stopped showing up to work and realized that nobody really noticed his absence. 5 months went by where he was technically still the chairman, but without any real power. Eventually, he left Apple, and in the same year founded Next Inc. So why am I telling you all this? It's simple. Even without Jobs, Apple managed to create some projects that were ahead of their time, innovative even. But for various reasons, they didn't really catch on in the market. Take the Pippin for instance. Launching it when the PlayStation and Sega Saturn were already out. That's almost like Jobs with the iPhone or Cook with the Apple Watch. Here's a fun question. Would these financially disastrous but revolutionary projects have happened if Jobs had stayed? A lot of people would say no way, that Jobs wouldn't have allowed it. But what exactly wouldn't he have allowed? The innovation? Here's how I see it. Genius recognized another genius, brought him into the company, and gave him the freedom to do his thing. Apple Newton hit the scene before PDAs were even a thing, and 17 years before the legendary iPad dropped and became a massive success. Apple QuickTake. laid the groundwork for digital photography, something that Apple has now perfected in their smartphones. And Pippin was meant to be a mix of a computer and a gaming console. And guess what? That's exactly what modern gaming consoles have evolved into. Jobs created this incredibly fertile environment, but it was missing one crucial element: a strong leader with a strategic mind to channel all that potential in the right direction. So on June 5th, 2023, at WWDC, Tim Cook finally unveiled the Vision Pro to the world. And by February 2nd, 2024, this mixed reality headset hit the US market. Inside, it's packing the powerful Apple M2 chip, which can handle everything from heavy graphics to AI tasks. You can control it with gestures, eye movements, and your voice. And honestly, when you hold this device in your hands, you really feel like you're stepping into the future, something straight out of sci-fi. Now, the Vision Pro is entering a market already populated with players like PlayStation VR and Oculus, but Tim Cook pulled off the same magic trick Steve Jobs did back in the day. He dropped a product that blew all the competition out of the water. Basically, Vision Pro is like a computer, but not in the traditional sense. It's a computer in a pair of glasses. It's hard not to draw parallels with Jobs' work here. Cook kept the spirit alive by bringing something completely new and cutting edge to the market. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Financially, the Vision Pro flopped. Out of the 850,000 units they planned to sell, Apple had to slash the target down to 450,000. Demand just wasn't what they expected, leading to rumors that Apple might even ditch the second version of Vision Pro, which was supposed to come out in 2025. And to top it off, on April 25th, Frank Casanova, the marketing director for Vision Pro, was let go. Ouch. Let's take a trip down memory lane and remember that even Steve Jobs had his fair share of setbacks. Take the Lisa computer, for example. It was Apple's first attempt at creating a computer with a graphical interface, but it flopped hard. Why? Well, because it was ridiculously expensive. But this failure led to the creation of the more affordable, though still pretty pricey Macintosh in 1984. So maybe, just maybe, we can hope that Vision Pro is just the first step towards something even bigger and better. Alright, so I want to share a pretty unconventional thought about the role Tim Cook played in Steve Jobs' life. We've all heard it countless times. The iPhone is Steve Jobs' greatest achievement. It didn't just change Apple, it changed an entire market. Let's be honest, it changed all of us. But Jobs wasn't just thinking about us, the customers. He was also shouldering the responsibility of a company with limitless potential. So how do you leave behind a legacy, not just for your customers, but for your company itself? We already know he nailed it, considering Apple sold over 231 million iPhones, 38 million Apple Watches, and 75 million pairs of AirPods and Beats just last year. But what's even more intriguing than the numbers themselves is the person who's been driving those numbers. In 1982, Tim Cook joined IBM, just as they were getting started with their PC division. This was way before Microsoft Windows was even a thing. At IBM, he climbed the ranks all the way up to Director of North American Fulfillment. After 12 years, he moved on and became the COO at Intelligent Electronics. Then in 1997, he made the jump to Compaq, one of the biggest PC manufacturers at the time, where he took on the role of Vice President of Corporate Materials. Cook's entire career has been about fine-tuning massive operations to run as efficiently as possible with minimal waste. Now, imagine the potential that opened up for Apple when Cook joined the team. Where should they steer development to not only create something new, but also make it profitable? After all, no money means no salaries, no innovation, no nothing. Choosing a successor is just as critical as assembling a team to create a new product, right? When Steve Jobs left Apple, the company managed to stay afloat for a few years on all the ideas and innovations, but then its market share started to plummet from 16% down to 4%. When Jobs returned in 1996, it only took him a couple of years to bring Tim Cook on board. And get this, he made the decision to hire Cook after just one interview. Basically, they were handed a company with a ton of serious problems. A lot of people in their position might have just sold off assets or clung to the old ways, like Nokia or Kodak did. Companies that lost their leadership because they couldn't keep up with the rapid tech advancements. Technology evolves so fast that if you don't keep it in check, everything can fall apart. That's why you need someone who can take a firm hand on the wheel and steer progress in the right direction. The year Tim Cook joined, Apple laid off about 3,000 employees. Cook immediately cleaned up the supplier situation, cutting down from over 100 suppliers to just 24. Then he tackled the inventory issue, where stock used to sit around gathering dust for months. He slashed it down to just 6 days worth, and eventually to 2. The whole approach changed too. Before, if a Chinese supplier ran into a problem, it would lead to endless discussions. But with Cook, it was different. An Apple manager was expected to be on a plane to the site within 30 minutes of a crisis. No delays, just action. Let's talk about 1997. Steve Jobs makes his big comeback to Apple, and he doesn't waste any time shaking things up. First thing he does, he slashes the company's product lineup, like big time. Apple goes from having a bunch of different models to just a few key ones. By the end of the year, Apple's lineup of desktop Macs is basically down to 4 models. The Power Macintosh G3. Everything else gone. But then, August 15, 1998, Apple drops a bombshell. On that day, they unveil the iMac G3, a computer that changed everything. It had this translucent case, this futuristic design. Honestly, it was like a breath of fresh air for the entire industry. This was the first major product Steve Jobs introduced after coming back, and it was also the world's first look at the genius of Jony Ive's design. And the reaction, people went nuts. Stores were flooded, and in the first 6 weeks, Apple sold almost 280,000 of these iMacs. By the end of the year, that number hit over 1 million, became the best-selling computer in Apple's history up to that point. Sure, all-in-one computers weren't exactly new. The first Macintoshes from the 80s were also all-in-one machines. But the iMac G3, that was a whole different story. It was beautiful, was stylish, and it was so fresh. And that perfect slogan, all-in-one, it's still a cornerstone of Apple's approach today. September 9th, 2014. Tim Cook walks on stage and announces Apple Pay. At that time, just in the US, people were spending $30 to $40 million a day using credit cards. Crazy, right? You'd think they could have just left things as they were. Plastic cards from all sorts of banks were working just fine. Honestly, I still can't wrap my head around how they not only came up with Apple Pay, but managed to seriously, permanently integrate it into our lives. It's such a brilliantly simple idea that could have easily gotten lost among all the massive projects like computers, chips, and high-tech gadgets. And then, just 3 days after the launch, boom, 1 million users signed up. But let's be real, the genius of this idea only became reality because Apple knew how to keep everything under control. They had to make deals with banks, make deals with the IRS. They had to make deals with everyone. When Steve Jobs returned to Apple in 1996, the company was teetering on the edge of collapse. But do you know what saved it? A cash infusion from none other than Apple's biggest competitor, Bill Gates. Yeah, Microsoft invested $150 million into Apple. Think about that for a second. Negotiating a deal like that with your main rival, that's not just business savvy, that's a legendary move. And this wasn't about technology, it was about strategy. That's the kind of stuff Tim Cook is known for today, and it's exactly why he's so successful. But Steve Jobs didn't just choose Tim Cook as his successor by chance. He knew the importance of being someone who doesn't just follow the rules, but sets them, creates new paths, and breaks the mold. Need an example? Look no further than the iPhone. It was the first smartphone to have glass over the screen, and that was all thanks to Jobs. During the development of the prototype, Steve decided that a plastic screen wasn't going to cut it. It scratched too easily. So what did he do? He reached out to Wendell Weeks, the CEO of Corning, a company that specializes in toughened glass. The problem was, Corning had never produced anything like this before, and they didn't have the capacity to make millions of units in just 6 months. But Jobs, being Jobs, simply said, "Don't worry, you can do it." And guess what? Corning delivered on time, and now they supply glass to pretty much every smartphone maker in the world. Think about this for a second. The Apple II came out in 1977. Then it took a whole 9 years before the first Mac arrived in 1984. And from there, things started rolling. The iMac in 1998, the iPod in 2001, and 6 years later, the first iPhone. It wasn't until 2010 that they finally launched the iPad. 6 revolutionary devices in 33 years. Now you might say, times were different, it was harder back then. But hold up, let's not jump to conclusions. Back then, the competition wasn't as fierce, and it was easier to wow people with something like a color screen because no one else had it. But today, we've got an abundance of everything, and sometimes quality gets lost in the sea of options. That's where Tim Cook stepped in and made Apple synonymous with simplicity, intuition, and ease of use. And now, with dozens of new models coming out from other companies, it feels like Apple doesn't impress as much anymore. Here I am, holding the Vision Pro, a brilliant device, both in terms of tech and software. But no matter how you spin it, it didn't cause the kind of buzz we were hoping for. Why? Because we are already saturated with technology. Every year we get a new iPhone. Back in the day, each new product was a leap 2 steps ahead of the last one, and the old one immediately felt outdated. Now looking back, it seems like things were better back then, but that's not true. Things were just different. Today we live in an age of information, where it's easy to get lost because it's all so accessible. I think Jobs envisioned this world and knew that his legacy would only survive if it was led by someone who wasn't chasing dreams, but moving carefully, following the principle of slow and steady wins the race. Everything has grown, and now the winner isn't the bold and reckless, but the one who's stable. If the game used to be about cards, fast, bold, and risky, now it's chess. One board, many pieces, and every hasty move can lead to big losses. You know, even if a project looks like a total flop at first, it can still succeed if you handle it right. Take Steve Jobs and his Next project. Initially, Next didn't take off at all, but Apple ended up buying it, and for good reason. The tech developed at Next became the foundation for Mac OS X and iOS. Plus, Jobs built a community of developers around Next, which seemingly transitioned into Apple's ecosystem. A lot of the innovations from Next were later refined and integrated into Xcode, Apple's main tool for developers. Or let's talk about Apple Maps. When Tim Cook launched it in 2012, it was such a disaster that the company faced a massive backlash.
I can tell you, so we screwed up.
But Cook didn't back down. They kept improving the maps, and eventually, they really did get better. Users gradually forgave Apple, and the service became pretty solid. If you think success has to happen overnight, remember this: the iPod only started making serious money and became truly popular 3 years in, when Apple added USB support and made it compatible with Windows. They could have given up on the project or sold it off, but they stuck with it and turned it into a hit. So even if things aren't going according to plan, that's no reason to ditch the idea. The key is knowing how to bring it to life. We've reached a point where having a long-term plan isn't just smart, it's absolutely necessary for survival. Tim Cook is out there pushing hard on AI and sustainability, and honestly, it's doing wonders for Apple's reputation. And you can bet something huge is brewing with Vision Pro 2 or maybe even 3. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Now let's take a trip down memory lane. Remember who started all this? Back in 2007, when Apple dropped the first iPhone, was nothing short of a revolution. But at the start, the iPhone was pretty limited to whatever Apple decided to put on it. Then came the App Store. This was the game changer that gave birth to mobile games, social networks, and all those services that are now basically a part of daily life. It flipped the tech world on its head and set a standard that other platforms could only dream of reaching. And despite all the crazy competition out there, as of 2024, the App Store is still rocking with around 1 billion active users worldwide. That's some serious staying power. You know, there's this key, totally subjective reason why I just can't bring myself to have a bad opinion about Tim Cook. Even when some of the criticism might be justified at times, we can't forget one thing. Steve Jobs picked him, and it wasn't some last-minute decision. Cook joined Apple back in 1998, thanks to Jobs, and only stepped into the CEO role in 2011. That's 13 years. A long time for Jobs to test Cook. If Jobs made a mistake with him, no, I just can't believe that. Especially when you look at the financial success Apple's had under Cook's leadership. And it's totally fine that Cook didn't try to become the product guy. He wasn't supposed to be. As a creator, Jobs understood that leading creators effectively is just a little more important than being a creator yourself. In most companies, product specialists aren't the ones running the show as CEO. They're often designers or engineers further down the hierarchy. A lot of people don't get that in a mature company like Apple, it's not the product itself that matters most, but the logistics, supply chains, distribution, finance, and marketing. And Cook has shown real talent in all this. That's why Horace Dediu calls him the best leader Apple's ever had. Even CNN called him the best CEO in 2014, and Financial Times named him Person of the Year. And listen, there's absolutely no reason to think Tim Cook doesn't respect Steve Jobs' legacy. In fact, he's honored it in a touching way, writing a heartfelt letter to employees and posting on social media. In that letter, he straight up said that Jobs' legacy is the foundation of Apple because Steve believed that passionate people could change the world. And it's not just talk, it's the company's actual philosophy. Cook also emphasized that Jobs wasn't just a great leader, he was a friend who had a huge impact on him and everyone else at Apple.
Steve's vision and passion live on here at Apple Park and everywhere in Apple. Today and always, we honor him.